Well, time now to talk the week in politics. I'm joined by Ebony Bennett from the Australian Institute and Peter Gregory from the Institute of Public Affairs. Ebony and Peter, thank you very much for being here. Let's begin first with the industrial relations reform. One of the most contentious parts of this, the proposed temporary changes to the Better Off Overall test, which would allow the Fair Work Commission to ignore the test when considering enterprise agreements for businesses affected by COVID-19, even if they leave workers worse off. We know unions have slammed it, while Christian Porter and business groups say it ensures business survival. Ebony, do you buy it? What's your take on it?
Well, I think it's really disappointing because, workers' share of national income compared to capital has been declining over the past couple of decades, but it's really significantly accelerated in recent years. So workers really, the balance was already out of whack compared to the rights of employers. And Australia already has one of the most draconian IR systems with draconian bargaining laws in most of the developed world. And now we're in the middle of a recession. More workers are out of work than ever before. Workers have less bargaining powers than they would because so many people are looking for jobs. And what's the Morrison government's solution? To kick workers while they're down. So it's not only the Better Off Overall test, which if you scrap that, it can only mean that workers will be worse off, but things like undercutting penalty and overtime rates for some part-time workers. Really, a lot of the measures that are in this IR bill, if they're implemented, will undercut pay and conditions for workers all across Australia. They'll drag us all down. And really what we've seen in recent years has been record low wages growth in the first place. And what we need if the economy is going to recover is wages growth. We need more money in workers' pockets to be able to spend in the economy. And if we keep undercutting their pay and conditions at work, the whole economy is going to take longer to recover than it needs to.
Peter, on that Better Off Overall test, the government's argument is that, well, if businesses survive, workers have a job, so therefore everyone's better. Is that enough?
Oh, look, we would actually like the coalition to be more ambitious with regards to industrial relations. They've been in power since 2013, and we probably haven't seen as much progress as we would like. There's currently 2 million Australians without work or underemployed. There's 600,000 Australians have lost their job in the private sector since March. And the only way we're going to solve that problem is by unleashing the power of the free market. The IPO released some research during the week which showed that in 1960, 26% of the national income accrued to family-owned and small businesses. In 2019, that was only 9%. So clearly this has been in decline for a really long time with regards to small business, and the pandemic has only made things worse. If we're going to solve this, we do need to unleash business, unleash the private sector, unleash the free market. Yet Australia still has the highest minimum wage in the world. We still have a $176 billion red tape bill every year. We have amongst the highest energy prices in the world, and we need to start addressing these issues along with IR if we're going to get back on our feet. And it's not just an economic issue; it's a moral issue. We're talking about workers, the dignity of work being part of a community, part of a team. It is a moral issue. The opportunity to go out and start a business is a moral issue, and it's part of what it is. Not only to be human, but what it is to be an Australian, is have that ability to do that. So we need to make sure we do that, particularly with regards to small business, and it's small business that get hurt the most with IR because they just don't have the resources to keep up with it. So, we'd like to see more ambition from the coalition on this one.
If we turn our attention to the UN's climate change summit, Scott Morrison was snubbed from that because Australia's lack of action, not deemed ambitious enough. Ebony, this probably isn't a good look for the PM, would you say?
No, it's not a very good look, particularly as he indicated that he would be there, but I don't think it's any great surprise to anyone. Australia's long been a laggard internationally on climate change. Just in January this year, we saw the worst bushfires Australia has ever experienced, and in response to that, the Morrison government has declared they want a gas-led recovery. There's no net zero by 2050 target. There's no greater ambition for 2030 emissions reductions targets. So there's absolutely nothing on offer here, and trying to take this idea that they would drop the use of Kyoto credits is basically like rocking up and promising, oh, we're not going to cheat anymore. Can you please give us a seat at the table? It wasn't going to fly. The Trump administration, we might have had, some allies there under Donald Trump in being laggards on climate change, but not anymore with an incoming Biden administration. They've made it really clear that climate change is going to be one of their key international priorities. and they're going to be pursuing it through trade and other means as well. And so now when Australia finds itself in really perilous trade conditions with China, one of our biggest trading partners, when we need allies more than ever, what the Morrison government is bringing to the table just isn't enough. And it wouldn't have come surprise to anyone internationally that they weren't invited to speak at this climate summit. Australia has to do much better. We actually really have no climate policy to speak of. So it's absolutely no surprise to anyone we didn't get invited to this Climate Ambition Summit.
Yeah, and just on that, Biden, the incoming Biden administration, we did see the President-elect tweet about the Paris Agreement again this morning. Peter, how does Australia navigate this relationship with the US, given there is going to be that more of a global push to up the action?
Oh, look, I think Australia will be fine. We're keeping up with our commitments with regards to climate change. I don't think we should be too worried about not being invited to a UN climate summit. The UN generally trolls the world with the choices that they make with regards to appointing certain countries to certain bodies and certain functions of their organisation. I mean, this is the organisation that at the moment has the Saudi Arabia on its UN Committee for Women's Rights. It recently, a couple of months ago, appointed China to its Human Rights Council. So I don't think we need to be too worried about the bizarre choices the UN makes with regards to who it adds to councils and who it allows to speak at summits and things like that. I honestly, like most Australians, couldn't care less if Scott Morrison is talking at some talk fest about climate change or not. This country has vastly more pressing needs and issues than A, climate change, and B, whether or not Scott Morrison is talking at a summit. If he was going to be talking at that summit, the thing that I'd like him to be focusing on is the just completely warped priorities of the international community with regards to the problems it chooses to face. At the moment, like any prediction that climate change activists make about the things that are going to happen in the future if we don't act now on climate change, none of those are as bad, none of those are as catastrophic as the tragedy that's unfolding right now in the world, which is 1 billion people not having access to electricity. The sum total of human misery that entails is not matched anywhere with regards to predictions about climate change. And the fact that that is 1 million miles down the international community's list of priorities compared to climate change shows just how warped the international community's priorities are. And if Scott Morrison was talking at that summit, I'd hope he'd raise those points, but I don't think it's a huge issue that he's not.
Yeah, well, given it's a climate change summit, probably wouldn't have gone down too well to off track on that. But we'll turn now to the ABC board. It's got until Tuesday to respond to a letter from the Communications Minister, Paul Fletcher, complaining about the story, the Inside Canberra bubble. Now, the Minister obviously said that this was all about concerns over the Act, but Ebony, did he overstep the mark?
I think he has. Communications Minister Paul Fletcher, his job in Cabinet should be to be an advocate for the independence of the ABC, not trying to undermine it because one of its news stories happened to embarrass a couple of his colleagues. The Four Corners story was clearly in the public interest, and I don't think really there'll be much of anything that the ABC board really needs to respond to. They have already stood behind the journalist and that story. And I would like to note that the Morrison government has done nothing, zero, zilch, to address the actual concerns that were raised in that program by those former Liberal staffers and the culture of sexism and inappropriate behaviour from senior ministers with staff and with other people while they're in Parliament. The Morrison government's done absolutely nothing to address those concerns, and that's all been lost in this question around the ABC's independence. But the ABC is independent. Luckily for us, Ida Buttrose as chair has probably faced down much scarier bullies than Paul Fletcher in her time. And I think probably Ida Buttrose as chair and the board will respond appropriately, but they should give short shrift to this letter because the Australians trust the ABC. It is our public broadcaster. It saved lives during the Black Summer bushfires. And now in a time where media is under greater threat than ever before from entities like Facebook and Google, we need the public broadcaster more than ever. And instead, we've got a government that keeps chipping away at its funding, chipping away at its independence, and using really overt bullying tactics like this letter. I thought it was really alarming that the minister had to rule out that he was thinking about sacking the ABC chair on Insiders this morning. I mean, that's where this debate has got to, and it's really disappointing and alarming.
And Peter, we're just almost out of time. Briefly from you, did he overstep?
Oh, look, I think it's just really difficult for the ABC to be objective at all. They serve a market which does not reflect the views of most Australians. I mean, we did a poll, the IPA did a poll earlier this year where only 32% of Australians said the ABC reflected the views of ordinary Australians, and it's completely difficult for them to be objective. It's really difficult for any media organisation to be objective, and this is just yet another reason why they should be privatised. I don't want to see the ABC disappear, but there's no reason why they can't go to a subscription or just run a few ads and run the service that way. The fact is that 2/3 of Australians in really difficult economic conditions have to pay their hard-earned taxes for this wealthy elite media organisation to tell them how much they hate them and how wrong they think they are. So
that's rubbish.
It's clearly an unjust situation, and yet another reason why the ABC should be privatised.
Well, we might leave that one there. Ebony Bennett from the Australian Institute, Peter Gregory, IPA. Thanks very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
The bottom 20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
Wages are growing at their slower, sustained pace.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.